Hi, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I see some people had come back from earlier's session. Thank you again for making it back. Um, so again, I'll probably just start again with take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories on which we and the University of Calgary are situated on today. Um, and not all of our speakers or participants are from Calgary, so just to put it out there, we at the SDGA are situated in Calgary, Alberta. And so, in the spirit of respect, reconciliation, and reciprocity, we honor and acknowledge the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 people of Southern Alberta, in particular the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Stoney Nakoda Nations, Tsuut'ina First Nation, and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We also recognize that the University of Calgary is situated on land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River, and that the traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Mohkinstsis, which we now call the city of Calgary. All right, thank you. And from there, I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight. Tonight's workshop is called Third Culture Kids Can Save the World, and will be presented by Della Ohene. Della is a writer, community organizer, and mental health advocate. After switching from electrical engineering to sociology, Della started a UN SDG-inspired initiative at her university called the Pink Backpack Project, which focuses on raising awareness around the experiences of houseless and low-income women in Kelowna through public education and creation of care packages. This organization that she's made has garnered both local and national attention, earning Della the Student Life Network Peace and Social Justice Award and the Think for Action's Top 20 Under 25. As well as a previously published undergraduate student researcher, Della continues to use her writing as a way to explore the intersections of poverty and gender, mental health, and other topics, which I'm sure she will be touching here and there on tonight. So from there, I'd be happy to welcome her onto the stage here in just a second.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, good evening, wherever you are. I'm currently based in London, England, and so I'm not quite sure where everyone else is, but I also want to acknowledge that all of you are from places both near and far, and that those spaces have their own traditional caretakers, and it is such an honor to join you all today. So thank you, Eden, for the great introduction. My name is Della Ohene, and I'll be talking to you today about how third culture kids can save the world. And so without further ado, I'm going to get my presentation up, and then we can go from there. Okay, so I started with the land acknowledgement before even showing you the first slide. So I'm already jumping the gun, but that's okay because it's important to start with the land acknowledgement. And so again, the title of the presentation, Third Culture Kids Can Save the World. And with that, I'll be tying into some of my lived experiences. But throughout this presentation, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat, any comments that you have in the chat. I really want this to be an interactive process, and I'll try to cue you as well to engage with the work throughout, because as much as this is a presentation / workshop, I want it to be as interactive as possible in this online space. So we've done our land acknowledgement, and I believe because this event is hosted by UFC, there are a lot of people on Treaty 7 land right now. I grew up on those lands partially, and I also studied in the Okanagan, where the traditional caretakers are the Okanagan Syilx Nations peoples, and so there is a lot of learning that goes into that and just honoring the spaces that we're in. And so I'm so grateful to be joined here today. Sorry, I'm so grateful to be joined here with you all today from all the places that you are in. All right, so for the goals for today's workshop / presentation, I want to share my lived experience used to generate meaningful change. That's the theme for this year's summit. Meaningful change is like such an impactful phrase, and I almost don't feel right using it for my work because I'm like, oh no, I'm just I'm just a person and like I haven't done anything that meaningful, but like that is a theme for today. And it's like, gotta like not be that modest when I talk about this sometimes. I want to empower you to use your lived experiences and unique talents as catalyst for community change. So creating that meaningful and sustainable impact. I want to create a safe and welcoming environment for you all. And so just like I want to create a good space for you, please let me know whether there's anything that comes up that you don't understand or you want clarity on. Please do either raise your hand so that you can chat with the group, or put your questions or comments in the chat again. And then I also want to engage in conversation. So that same piece of using the reactions, raising your hand, putting any questions or comments in the chat. All right. So going on to our next slide, we'll start with a question. Who is a third culture kid? And this is where I'm actually going to invite you all to interact a little bit with me. So if you have an idea of who a third culture kid is, or you are one yourself and you can like relate to that, please put it in the chat or raise your hand to answer.
We would definitely love to hear what you guys think, what a third culture kid is in the chat here. So definitely encourage you guys to use that. But I will chime in here. I know we had kind of had conversations of what a third culture kid is, but already that was quite a while back, actually. So I'm going to chime in with my opinion here. I'm guessing it's someone, for example, for myself, I'm an immigrant here to Canada, but I've been raised here. And so pretty much like having a Canadian culture, but then if I bring it over to the Philippines, I have Filipino culture. However, over there, I don't quite fit in perfectly either. To some extent, I believe that's an aspect of what a third culture kid would be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent take on it. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Masumi here has put into the chat being an immigrant, which is similar to what I had said too. Veronica here, I think it's someone that has experienced multiple cultures or lived in different cultures.
Yeah, these are really good.
Yeah, and Irene has said someone who's raised in another culture that is not their parents' culture.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, those are all like excellent excellent responses to the question. And so if we go into it, many of you were correct. A third culture kid is a child with a mixed identity that is influenced both by their parents' culture and the culture in which they are raised. It was a term that was coined by American sociologist Ruth Useem in the 1950s. And just like many of you said, if, for instance, you're an immigrant, you can fit into that third culture space because your parents are from one culture and then you are being raised in a different culture outside of that. And then the third culture term is also associated with children of expats, military children who move around a lot. And in this intersection, you have that third culture because it's not quite, your cultural understanding isn't quite the same as the country that you're being raised in, and it's not quite the same as your parents' background. And it can often lead to a confusing and quite often debilitative condition. And this condition is exacerbated growing up in a country like Canada. I included that line as part of the definition because I thought calling it a condition was very interesting. Like there's like something inherently like, you know, not correct about it, but like it's a very good thing to be a third culture kid. I am one myself. I was born in Ghana and then my family moved over to Canada. And then briefly we lived in Saudi Arabia, then back to Canada. So I've got a mishmash of like cultures from growing up. And it really does take root in those formative years of your childhood. And then if we go further, something that I really wanted us to take away from this concept of being a third culture kid is that as a third culture kid, you've experienced cross-cultural transitions that have molded you into an adaptable individual. Regardless of the challenges that you may have faced as a third culture kid, you've been shaped into a multicultural individual. And that was taken from Rudo Ellen Kazembe in Teen Vogue back in 2016. And so this whole premise of third culture kids can save the world world. It's not like literal that they're the ones who are going to, you know, save the world and solve all our problems. Rather, it's a way of understanding that a cross-cultural background and an intersectional perspective is very necessary as we move forward to try to solve some of the world's problems, and as we try to engage in meaningful, sustainable, and ethical change. All right. So I kind of alluded to this in the previous slide, but what can we learn from third culture kids? This premise of being sort of a cultural chameleon and being able to adapt in different spaces.
Again, if you guys have any ideas or opinions on this prompt here, feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand to join us on the stage even. We would love to hear directly from you.
I'll give it a few more seconds before we move on.
Yeah, but if I could chime in again.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
No, yeah. Oh, actually, we have someone in the chat here. That's okay. I want to prioritize our participants here. Irene said our ability to communicate across different cultures.
Yeah, that's really good. All of you are putting like question marks after your comments, but like you're all saying like things that like are super clear and make perfect sense. Yeah. Don't put those question marks, put an exclamation mark.
That's so true. I'm assuming here their experiences and unique understanding of the world. Veronica, yeah. I've lived in the Philippines, Ireland, and Canada. And from what I have learned, I definitely think that I have experienced different perspectives.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And all very different countries with different histories. That's so cool. All right. Well, thank you all for participating. So yeah, you're really on the right track with the conversation that I'm trying to generate. What can we learn from third culture kids? It's the importance of developing an intercultural and intersectional perspectives, kind of like what Veronica alluded to, being having lived in the Philippines, Ireland, and Canada. You know, they have this unique perspective of being able to see from different cultural backgrounds, in being able to understand people from different cultures and kind of switching your lens to a different cultural background, you're able to develop empathy. And with that, you're able to approach new spaces and people with compassion. In the work that I've done that's inspired by the UN SDGs, which we'll get to in a second, I think a really key aspect is being able to view people with compassion and empathy, because in so doing, you can meet them where they are in their stage of life, regardless of their cultural, religious, socioeconomic differences, etc. Of course, being a third culture kid is not a recipe for being the most empathetic and the kindest person in the world, but from learning about people from different perspectives, from opening up your own worldview, it can be a very powerful tool in creating that meaningful and sustainable change. Another aspect or another thing that we can learn from third culture kids is to engage in lifelong learning. When you're a third culture kid, you're not acclimatized to a particular nation state, in that I've never felt like particularly patriotic. I'm not like, you know, particularly steadfast in following with one country's politics or another. And that really opens me up to learning about different cultures, learning about different spaces and different people continually in order to understand the new spaces that I find myself in and understand new people that I meet. And so I think lifelong learning is really a vital tool in creating meaningful and sustainable change. And we'll touch on that a little bit later as well. And then another thing is that all of these traits that we're looking at, having an intercultural and intersectional perspective, being empathetic, being compassionate, lifelong learning, they're all necessary in our post-COVID and changing social, political, and economic landscapes. The COVID-19 pandemic has kind of made some people not want to travel, has made some people not, want to go outside. Rightfully so. It is a very uncertain time. But on the same token, it makes us see that the world is extremely globalized. We are extremely interconnected in our socioeconomic backgrounds, in our political backgrounds, and just travel in general. And as a result, it's important to generate these intercultural and intersectional perspectives so that we can better solve the world's problems. Now, are there any definitions or anything that people want clarity on before we move forward? You're all good. If everything makes sense, please give a reaction, and then we'll continue moving forward. Okay, a few thumbs up, claps, hearts. Okay, I'll take that as a yes to moving forward. All right. So with that, let's go into the UN SDGs. Now, I take it that if you are at this summit, you know what the UN SDGs are. And if you don't, no worries there, because we'll touch on them briefly here as well. But I was first introduced to the UN SDGs when I started working with a club called Engineers Without Borders Canada. Some of you might know it from your university days or even in your professional paths. And so with Engineers Without Borders Canada, I joined them back in my engineering days, and I got to go back to Ghana, where I was born, to work with a tech social enterprise. Now that was extremely impactful for me because I got to do hands-on work in the tech social enterprise scene and kind of see the behind the scenes of what it is to do community work back in the country that I was born in. It also gave me a new nuanced perspective of the Canadian nonprofit landscape and kind of seeing where these two identities that I have can meet. And so really understanding the UN SDGs was pivotal for me in just catalyzing my desire to be a part of meaningful and sustainable change. And so, as you all probably know, there are 17 distinct sustainable development goals, as you see on the screen here. And they all have different objectives for each nation, state, business, and individual to strive toward. Now, we will come back to the UN SDGs as a whole, but while we are here, I'm going to share a link with you in the chat if I can. Hopefully I can. And then that way you will be able to go to the website where I got this from so that you can see all of the goals as well. And so can someone give me a thumbs up if they saw a link go in from my end? Okay, brilliant. So please open up that link right now and just have it in a separate tab because we will come back to it later in the presentation. Okay, so after working with the Engineers Without Borders Canada, I also worked with the Equity and Inclusion Society at my university. And in that space, we did a lot of workshops around equity, diversity, and inclusion at UBC's Okanagan campus. And it was a really great way to continue conceptualizing the UN SDGs in my everyday life. And so again, these are 17 goals, and they are an attempt for all of us to create a better and more equitable environment by the year 2030. These encompass a global desire to end poverty, fight inequality, and address the urgency of the climate crisis. I see a lot of hearts going up. I don't know what's going on, but like I love it. Thank you for the feedback. It's so pretty, like when it comes on the screen. And so we're 5 years in the UN SDG process, like since these goals have been launched, and a lot of initiatives have gone up globally, locally, which is so good to see that the world is really tuning in and investing into these goals. And so with that, my interest in the UN SDGs and my work with the Equity and Inclusion Office and Engineers Without Borders Canada led to the Pink Backpack Project. Now, the Pink Backpack Project is inspired by the UN SDG goal number 10, which is reduced inequality. And so it was founded in 2018 at my university by myself. It's so weird to say, but yes, I founded it, and it aims to mobilize students to use their skills and talents to address / tackle areas of inequity in their community. So our current focus is on raising awareness around hardships faced by houseless and low-income women. And so we do this by creating care packages containing pads, toiletries, and other personal hygiene items. Now that I've graduated from university, I can't lead a club anymore. So I've passed on the mantle to current students who are continuing that work. And I hope that in my lifetime, I can make it the Pink Backpack Project into its own charitable organization and have university chapters. So if anybody here knows how to do that, like find me on like Instagram and like let's chat, because it's not easy. So anyhow, with the Pink Backpack Project, again, we are inspired by goal number 10, reduce inequalities. There are so many goals that relate to the work that the Pink Backpack Project does, however, because the goals do kind of intersect, but this is the one that is like the closest to where our missions are focused. And so as you can see here with the first target, there are targets underneath each of the goals, and target 10.2 is to promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion. And so if I just read that out, what they want from that goal is that by 2030, they want to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other status. So with that, what we're trying to do is really generate a space in which we can have social and even a little bit of economic inclusion for the women and gender diverse individuals that we serve. The reason why we're creating these care packages with pads, tampons, and toiletries is because as a houseless woman, it can be extremely difficult to acquire some of those basic items that some of us do take for granted. So with period poverty, we're really trying to generate some awareness around that, which is the inability to sustainably afford pads and tampons. And so, and that also relates to target 10.4, which is adopt fiscal and social policies that promote equality. So the Pink Backpack Project has been able to do a bit of research as well. And we found that there are certain policies in place that are not the most equitable for gender diverse persons who are in need of the resources that the Pink Backpack Project is trying to gather. So with that, we're trying to be a bit of a social intervention program. Obviously, it's a small scale right now, but in so doing, we're hoping to have some sort of policy asks for the city of Kelowna to help promote better access to pads, tampons, and toiletries for gender diverse folks. So with that, oh, whoopsies. I'm just going to go back. Okay, with that, the Pink Backpack Project being what it is in creating care packages for houseless women, because we started at a university and because I'm super nerdy, I wanted to have research to back it up. And so we created our first paper, The Visibly Invisible, and got that published through a journal at our university. So, and it's called Visibly Invisible, an introductory exploration of nuanced experiences of homeless women in Kelowna and the role of student activists. So for anyone who would like to read it, this is totally not a plug so that you read my paper, but I will share the link with you in the chat. And so that was really our first go at generating some research and digging into the issue in Kelowna. And that was really impactful for me as the organizer of the PBP to really look into what it is that the community needs and what it is that the problems existing are. Because it's one thing to to put together a care package with pads and tampons, but it's another to really understand the nitty-gritty everyday challenges that houseless and low-income women are facing. From there, I was able to apply for a grant for some research funding and continued to do further research at my university, this time supervised by a professor. That led to Visibly Invisible 2, exploring the barriers and coping strategies of houseless and low-income women in Kelowna, BC. You'll notice that between the two presentations or two titles, the word homeless was replaced with the word houseless, because in my research, I found that the word houseless is more inclusive. Some people have a home, but they have a physical building that they live in, but the home is not what you would consider a home. It might be a volatile situation in which there is domestic abuse. And so houseless is a little bit more inclusive. And so again, that's my own learning translating into the work that the PBP is doing. And with that ties into lifelong learning as being a key aspect in doing that meaningful and sustainable work. It's one thing to, to brand your organization or your initiative with a certain, slogan, but it's another to be always revising it so that it's the most equitable and salient for the demographic that you're trying to represent or serve. So with that said, we'll go into lifelong learning. That segue was so smooth. I can't believe I just did that. And so with lifelong learning, that's the special sauce. It's the process of continually seeking out knowledge and developing one's skills for the sake of personal and or professional development. And for me, it's been super impactful in my understanding as an individual and as a professional. And so sorry, there's a little typo. It's a means of continually contributing to the ever-changing and developing narrative of social movements and innovative solutions. So again, that simple change of phrase from homeless to houseless made the wording of the PBP that much more inclusive. In whatever work it is that you're doing, whether you're part of an organization, you lead an organization, or you want to start an initiative, it's always important to continually learning, continually be willing to reiterate your process, because this is a space in which we're helping or trying to help other human beings. Things are always going to be varied, things are always going to be changing, and you need to be open-minded to the fact that you're not always going to have the right answers, and you're always going to have to be willing to learn and be corrected. So a little bit of humility and lifelong learning goes a long way in the sustainable development realm. So with that, a bit of my lifelong learning. These are some of the other UN SDGs that I'm interested in learning more about. There's good health and well-being, goal number 3, and goal number 13, climate action. Climate action has been a hot topic these past recent years, and I myself am not well versed in climate and the climate crisis at all. And so what I've actually done is gotten myself some more books on climate change so that I can start reading up. When it comes to good health and well-being, the Pink Backpack Project, because in our research we found that so many of the women that we serve may have substance issues or may have a past history of those issues. I want to learn more about that so that we can better tailor our programming and even our education pieces on social media to be as informative and effective as possible. With that social media piece as well, social media can be a form of education, which is also very impactful and powerful in relaying information to other people and gaining awareness around a certain movement or topic. And so I'm just going to share the Pink Backpack Project social media so that you can check that out if you'd like to. No pressure whatsoever. But with that, I just want to encourage you all that whatever your interests are, whatever your goals are, do dig into them. And I know that because of social media, we kind of inhabit a space in which we kind of feel the need to like always know the most about a topic or always speak on a topic. You don't need to feel that pressure, because there is something to be said for being silent and learning and being educated, or taking the time to educate yourself. It's hard to like keep up with what's going on in the world. It can be exhausting and no one can know everything. But at the very least, with lifelong learning, you're continually engaging with spaces in humility and making sure that you can stay as informed as possible. All right. And so with that, I want to encourage you all right now, with the time that we have left in this workshop, to create your own path. And so if you have a piece of paper or on your desktop or wherever you're watching this, whether you can, start writing down some ideas, whether there was anything that I said in here that kind of sparked something for you, or if there's anything that you already had in motion, I want you to kind of think about that. And you'll remember I shared a link with the globalgoals.org. If you go to that website, you'll be able to see all of the goals, and then the ones that kind of speak to you, I want you to click on those and see the way they break down the goals, and see how you can align some of your initiatives or some of the things that you want to be a part of with those goals. Of course, everything you do does not have to be aligned with the UN SDGs, but just wanted to stay on theme with the summit so that, I can have that segue back to it. And so with creating your own path, just to get some of those ideas generated, what are you passionate about? For me, I was super interested in seeing where I could bring back my learning from Engineers Without Borders Canada and the Equity and Inclusion Office in an impactful way at my university. And so the best way to do that was to start a club. I wanted to serve women in the community because I myself identify as a woman, and so it was an easy place to start. And from that, I just kind of built it out from there. What unique skills do you have? Sometimes it can be hard to identify a passion, and so you got to go from what it is that you know how to do. I am a pretty decent writer, and so doing the research side of things for the PBP was really fulfilling for me because I got to like nerd out and do a bunch of research and then like present it to people. Like that was super interesting for me. And that small piece of just relaying information is impactful in of itself because you can help to generate more information and more understanding in your community. What initiatives are already going on in your community? Sometimes it might be a matter of just joining what's already there. That way you can be a part of creating that meaningful impact and sustainable change. And it can just be a matter of like fostering your place in the organization or your place in that field. Is there a gap that you can fill, whether in the organization or by starting a new initiative? What resources can you use in your continued learning? You don't have to buy a bunch of books on sustainable development. Sometimes you can just Google it and like, you know, search and see what there is out there. You can go to your library. You can also talk to people to get more involved and to see what they're already doing in their communities. There's so many ways to get active and get involved when it comes to sustainable and meaningful change. So I'll give you about like 1 minute to kind of generate some ideas. I'll turn my camera off and then we can like come back and chat. If you don't feel like chatting, that's too bad because I don't know how this will work without it. So we're going to come back and chat. Okay, I'll see you in like 2 minutes. All right, that is the 2-minute mark. Let's bring it back, everyone. If you're ready to come back, please give a quick reaction. Okay, sweet. Looks like everyone is here. Okay, so this is where it gets tricky because y'all are going to need to participate. And so, Ethan, if you did the activity, could we start with you to see some of the ideas that you're able to generate?
Okay. I didn't follow it to the T, I'm not gonna lie, but I was
No, that's good. That's okay.
off the dome here. I at some point actually was very passionate about SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. I think it really stemmed from my program, my educational program with UFC, and just being in geology and wanting to focus on hydrogeology. And I really just like wanted to push it from there. But I think honestly, throughout my undergrad and even beyond graduation, I've leaned a lot more towards SDG 17. I know it's a lot broader. It's partnerships for the goals, and I think like just a consistent part of my life and my lived experiences is I love bringing people together. I love bringing different perspectives together and coming to some kind of development from that, whether that looks like in the space of sustainable development or if that just looks like from a perspective of personal growth. So that is just personally something I really love. And I guess that kind of segues into the unique skills that I have. For some reason, I just like, I'm good at talking to people. Yes, a part of that just comes a little naturally. I started off as an awkward kid and I would just kind of slice through the awkwardness with a little bit more awkwardness, and people seem to like it. What initiatives are already going on in your community? I'm actually going to group that with like what resources can you use in your continued learning? I think a really, really big part of like how I've kind of really gotten into it is, well, one, in my last like year and a half at UFC, I pursued the Certificate in Sustainability Studies program. And I actually don't think that's ever been brought up throughout this summit. And if you guys in the audience have heard about it, I would totally recommend you looking into it if that's something you're interested about. This is a lot of diving into the SDG. Sorry, I'm like taking up the time just like diving into these questions, but I love them. Yeah, so that was one of the things where I really tried to actively pursue the SDGs and actually kind of learn more about the basic foundation of it, like the history and the where the SDGs come from and like sustainable development. There's a lot more that you can learn from that way. And then, but beyond that, also like volunteering with the SDGA. Kind of, I think what was important to me there was to get more involved and have some sort of leadership role in that space. Even as a student, there's a lot on campus. There's so many opportunities for you as a student, and like learning experiences for you to kind of go after. And then, sorry, I'll try and quickly like sift through this to give other people a chance here. Is there a gap that you can help fill? Honestly, when I landed like even in the SDGA, I ended up like director of events. I'm not gonna lie, like I had no idea what I was gonna do as director of events. But even from that position and up until now, like here I am co-leading the summit. I have definitely developed in that way. There's a lot of spaces where you kind of go into it, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how you can fit in that role, and you find yourself in ways excelling in it. So yeah, and then really quickly, who can you talk to get more involved? It's things like, honestly, with the summit, just very personally with the summit, just speaking to the speakers that we've featured with the summit, like Della here, as well as Todd and Vita and Addie and Annie from like previous workshops. These are ways to get involved. These are people that are doing work in the SDG space, in the sustainable development space. So I think that has actually done great wonders in empowering our attendees and even just inspiring them more to create the action and continue doing the work that they do. And I should cap it there and hand it off to someone here. Irene in the audience has actually raised her hand to come join us on stage here as well. So I'm going to let her up on the stage too.
Sure thing. And thank you, Eden, for sharing your perspective. Like that, those were really good points that you brought up. How you identified your unique skills, how you went and found resources and organizations in your community to follow through with, how you even filled a gap that needed, like, assistance, like event planning. That is so hard. I hate event planning, and the fact that you did it is incredible because somebody needs to do it. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. And so we'll pass the mic to Irene. When you're ready, please begin.
Hi, Irene. Can you hear us?
Bad. I didn't even turn my camera on or my mic. Sorry. I'm joining through my phone. I'm just waiting to go in the hospital really quick. But yeah, I just want to commend Eden when she was leading this. She was really, really leading this really, really well. And I think I can also agree with Della. I don't even know how to it's crazy how much it goes into planning an event. So I just want to commend Eden very quick about that. But I believe the goal that resonated the most with me was number 3, so good health and well-being. Especially I'm a 4th-year nursing student at U of C, so I resonate really well with kind of ensuring that everyone has good access to like good health and like healthcare in general. And I believe these are the kind of the skills that I can utilize, especially with kind of tending to these goals, I guess. And as well, I also grew up. I actually really love this workshop. Is really really resonates with me, especially because I also grew up in Canada, but I moved when I was 10, and I'm 20, so 21. Well, half of my life was in the Philippines, and the other half is here. So there's definitely this like split part of me of like my own values as well. And actually, when I graduate as a nursing student, I actually hope to work with vulnerable populations in the Philippines, as well in Canada as well. But I really want to go back to the Philippines and help kind of improve the healthcare there just a little bit, especially because I did see that gap in my hometown as well. I think the resources that I would use to kind of continue this learning is to also kind of learn from other nurses that went to kind of, there's also a thing called like Nurses Beyond Borders, I believe. So kind of seeing like their experiences within that as well and seeing how I can help. And maybe even looking into other like travel. I know there's quite a bit of travel nurses too, like within the faculty. So kind of looking into that and how they did that as well. So that's the main initiative that I really want to look into is like just good health and well-being and improving healthcare, as well as removing inequalities, especially in kind of developing countries that where inequalities are very, very prominent, especially like in the Philippines where I grew up in. So I really want to kind of help just even out that field a little bit. But yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. And again, you bring that third culture perspective into the mix. And you even talked about like how it kind of lets you recognize inequalities. And that is so impactful because like inequalities exist in every culture around the world. So it's important to be able to like kind of know how you can do your part in contributing to reducing those inequalities. So thank you for that. Is there anyone else that would like to go? It's okay if you don't. Not everyone has to go for this to work. Thank you, Irene and Eden, for that participation. While you were all brainstorming, I also got some of my books that I'm using to learn. So just the other day, I picked up some books on the Anthropocene. So the Anthropocene is a way of looking at the climate crisis and understanding the human relationship to the environment. So again, because I really want to be better educated when it comes to the climate crisis, I got those books to read. And since I moved to the UK, I got this book called Black Women's Lives in Britain. So that's just what the cover looks like. And the reason I did it is because I think it's important to situate yourself in the history and the socioeconomic situation of the place that you're in. When we first moved to Canada, it was super impactful for me to be able to learn about Indigenous communities in elementary school. I know that not all education systems in Canada do that work, but it's so vital in understanding the land that you're on, the context of it, and really being able to honor the land and its traditional caretakers and peoples. And so as I've moved over to the UK, I want to be able to understand the context of the different demographics that inhabit this space. And so this is one way of doing that. And so when it comes to creating a meaningful impact and sustainable change, you don't necessarily have to join a major organization. You don't necessarily have to, take on an executive role in a nonprofit. You can just do your part in picking up a book and reading, simply being informed about the space that you're in so that you can engage with resources sustainably, so that okay, like this producer actually like really supports like the underprivileged youth in this community, so I'm going to buy from them instead. Or, oh, this space, like they actually have a program where kids can like work coming from like the foster care system and have an opportunity and better access in their community, and so okay, I'm going to like invest my money here. It's not a matter of like being a part of a nonprofit. You can always do those little things in your day-to-day to create that meaningful and sustainable change. Sometimes we think about these grand goals, these SDGs, and like, oh, how can I do my part? It can literally start by just learning about it. And even as, we were all speaking, I was super inspired, and I was like, oh, like, where can I learn more about the SDGs? Because even though I'm in this space, there's always more to learn. And there's like edX, there's Coursera, and these are all just like online spaces where you can take like online courses, and a lot of them are free. I'm not sponsored by them, although I wish. But though I'm just like mentioning those because those are spaces where you can take online classes and get better informed about things. So there are so many resources if there is something that you're passionate about and you want to be a part of. But with that said, I want to give you some reminders for community work, because as much as we want to see the world be a better place, and as much as we want to take care of the world, we need to be able to take care of ourselves. Advocacy work, activism, community work, it can be very draining, it can be very exhausting. And a lot of the times the material that you're going to engage with can be a little bit discouraging. When you read about the histories, for instance, of residential school children, or you learn about the colonial processes that underscore a lot of our lives, it can be very discouraging. And you're like, oh my goodness, how will the system ever change? So it's important to take care of yourself, takes time for self-care and reflection so that you can stay well, so that you can continue doing good work. It's important to ask questions. If you're feeling overwhelmed, or if you don't even know where to start with your learning, ask questions, attend events like these, continue to engage with the space with an open mind, because that is so important. When you remain open-minded and you remain humble, you're able to sustainably engage with the space for your own sake personally, and also for the sake of the continued progress of the space that you're in. Learning never stops because there's so much that you can learn. There's so much that, that an individual person doesn't know. And empathy is always better than apathy. So if you find yourself just like bombarded by the news, you literally can't take in any more information, take a step back, take social media breaks, take news breaks. The news will always be there, but your wellness and well-being, that matters like right here and now. So always maintain that and keep it as best as you can. And with that, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for joining me for this online workshop. It was such a pleasure to be with all of you. And special thanks to Eden and the Sustainable Development Goal Alliance. It was super cool to speak at this year's summit. And I hope that you were able to take something away from this evening. So yeah, I really don't know where to go from here. So Eden, I'll pass it right back to you.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, I could probably take it off from here. You kind of closed up. Thank you so much, Della, for your presentation. I think you dug into a lot of amazing things and chiming in with your lived experiences too. That was just very beautifully put. And thank you for interacting so closely with our participants here. And also making me kind of chime in. I'm taking like this like organizer role, like kind of like having a little bit of a back end perspective. But yeah, no, I thank you for making me part of your presentation as well. I really love that. And thank you to those who participated in the group here. Yeah, I think from there we'll wrap it up. We have hit the 4:50 mark here. Again, thank you, Della, for all that. This is being recorded and probably will likely be shared. So I appreciate you putting this together and speaking so amazingly for us. And I know it is midnight, coming up midnight over there where you're at. So again, I appreciate you joining us so late in London here. Yeah, we'll keep in touch.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And again, if you're interested in the Pink Backpack Project, you can find us on Instagram, and always continue learning. I encourage you all. I think that you're all in the right space because you engaged with us today. And yeah, have a good night.
Awesome. Have a good night, everyone.